Welcome. Thanks for joining us. This is the question and answer session for the 2021 Stories of Our Watersheds film event. And tonight we have the pleasure of meeting some of the filmmakers and learning more about the featured films that were in our film event. Hopefully you've all had a chance to see this year's films. There were 9 in total. And if not, you have until midnight to go to the YouTube link and to catch up. You can use the timestamps that are in the description to jump ahead to wherever you may have left off, or to catch a particular film if you're looking for it. And we have representatives from 4 of those films here tonight to answer questions. Some of those are prepared, but we also encourage everyone attending to use the Q&A button to submit questions, and whether they're general or directed specifically for certain films. I'm going to introduce people in just a minute, but first I just wanted to give people a little bit of context. So River Restoration Northwest has been around for over 20 years, and this is our 8th annual film event. It's the 2nd time using a virtual platform, so we've adapted in COVID. Normally we host the event at a theater, and it's a great way to get people together. But we've had to go to the virtual platform, which in some ways allows for a wider audience, which is great too. River Restoration Northwest is a nonprofit organization committed to advancing the science and practice of river restoration. And we host a symposium every year in February, along with short courses, field trips, and speaking events throughout the year. We rely on the support of sponsors and members. And so I want to start with an acknowledgement and a big thank you to our sponsors this year. And we have those sponsors on a few slides. And if you're interested in becoming a member, you can check out our website for details. It's rrnw.org. And finally, before we start, a big shout out to Wahoo Films for being an invaluable partner over the last several years, helping make this film event possible. So with that said, let's go to introductions, and I'll start. I'm Tad Schwager. I'm a board member for River Restoration Northwest and the film event coordinator. And I'll also be the moderator for tonight. And Elizabeth Gutierrez is the co-lead for this film event, and she's going to be running some of the tech support in the background for any Zoom issues that come up. And now for introducing our panelists, we have 4 films represented, and I want to let them kind of introduce themselves and what the organizations that they represent and their roles in the film. So we're going to go around. I'm going to call on folks to chime in, and you can unmute and introduce yourselves. As you'll see, we have the names of each film and a background to help people remember which film you're associated with. But why don't we start with building a new future at South Prairie Creek? Kristen, do you want to lead things off and just introduce yourself?
Sure. Yeah, my name is Kristen Williamson. I'm a salmon restoration biologist and project manager for a group called the South Puget Sound Salmon Enhancement Group, which is a nonprofit, non-government group in Washington State and one of 14 regional fisheries enhancement groups across the state. I worked really closely with Jennifer Moslemi of Caravan Labs on this project, who is the producer, but I was the project manager on behalf of many, many partners that made this project happen, and it went to construction in 2020.
Great, thanks. And Jennifer, how about you? Do you want to introduce yourself really quick?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Jennifer Moslemi. I'm a producer and owner at Caravan Lab. We had the good fortune to work with Kristen and others on the South Prairie Creek video. Just personal background, I'm a stream ecologist by training, and I've gone on to do science-based or science-related media storytelling. So this project was very exciting for me to get to work on.
Terrific. Yeah. All right, let's go to the fish in the flame. Lewis, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, happy to, Tad. Thanks. Yeah, so I'm Lewis Wirtz. I'm the communications director at the Western Landowners Alliance. We are a West-wide nonprofit that was founded and is led by landowners who are dedicated to the health and prosperity of working lands in the American West. Specifically, we advance policies and practices that sustain working lands, connected landscapes, and native species, which is why we were so excited to tell this story that's in The Fish in the Flame about private land stewardship and its dedication to preserving native species. My connection to the film is that I basically helped craft the story and select our film crew, and worked closely with Paige Bono, who is and our partners at the Chama Peak Land Alliance, to make sure that we had the right story to tell about this really cool fish and its recovery. So and Paige, you can.
Great, it's great to have you here. Paige, how about you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Paige Bono. As Lewis mentioned, work together on The Fish in the Flame. I'm an independent contractor, but the other partner organization, the Chama Peak Land Alliance, who partnered with us on this film, contracted me to just kind of help facilitate the process, and I ended up managing the project and helping with production with Days Edge. I also, I'm a freelance writer and facilitator in the region, and through some previous work was pretty connected with both of our characters, Jim White and Tim Harmon. So got to convince those guys to let us tell their story.
Yeah, great, thank you. Let's go next to breaking barriers. Chris, do you want to start?
Sure, yes, thank you, Ted. Good evening,
Welcome.
everybody. I'm Chris Gannon. I'm the Executive Director of the Crooked River Watershed Council. We're headquartered in Prineville. And the project that we featured in the film is a fish ladder, probably 25 years in the making when you go back to its sort of conceptual level. Really excited to have the project done and behind us, because it does open 125 miles of fish habitat for middle Columbia steelhead and spring Chinook salmon.
Terrific, yeah, thanks. And you worked with Michelle. So Michelle, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Michelle with Wahoo Films, and had a wonderful opportunity to work with Chris. I think the project was almost, or 2 years at least, with the part we were filming. It took many more years to make it happen, but Wahoo Films has been doing watershed films for over 15 years, and love getting into the water with these guys, and just happy to be a part of this event.
Great, thanks, Michelle. For Rainbow Bend, why don't we start with Tim, if you don't mind?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Tim O'Leary. I'm a public information officer and multimedia specialist for the King County Department of Natural Resources and Parks. I've been with the county for about 19 years, so I came on just after the Rainbow Bend project was getting started. So I've been here for the whole duration, and this is actually our second video that we've done on this project. We did one about 5 years ago, kind of a prequel. So I know it very well.
Great. Judy, welcome.
Hi, everyone. My name is Judy Blanco. I'm also with King County Department of Natural Resources and Parks, in the Water and Land Resources Division. And my job, I'm an ecologist, and my job focuses on salmon recovery, but then also habitat restoration, open space conservation, climate resiliency, kind of like the whole thing. And so I'm fairly new to this job at the county, maybe 2 years and a little bit. But prior to that, I've been working on the Cedar River, which this film talks about, for like 13 years. And I know the Rainbow Bend site really well. I couldn't wait to work on a video about what happened to this project after a flood in 2020 with Tim. And so I'm hooked now. It's the first like film-like thing I've been involved in. I just want to make more and more.
Great. Thanks for that. Yeah. So it's great to have you all here, and we want to hear more about. So the questions kind of run in two veins, I would say, and it's terrific that we have sort of a team representing each film, because some of them are questions related to the projects themselves and a little more background for people to understand what happened and some of the details behind those projects. But there's also questions that relate to the filmmaking process and how you went about telling the story of them. So I think, we kind of touched on this through the intros, but I just wanted to remind everybody who may have watched the films, a couple days ago, just which ones we're talking about here. So for South Prairie Creek, we're talking about a kind of floodplain and a stream channel project at an old dairy farm site near Puyallup, Washington. And Kristen, do you want to remind us of kind of the acreage involved and how many years this was in the making and any other kind of interesting facts about the project?
Yeah, so the project is on South Prairie Creek, which is a tributary to the Carbon, which is a tributary to the Puyallup, near Puyallup, Washington. It is the primary producer of Puyallup River Fall Chinook and Steelhead. So it's a really important stream in the overall strategy for the Puyallup watershed to restore. The project really started in 2002 with watershed restoration planning, where groups of partners came together to create a South Prairie Creek action plan. Since then, about 640 acres of floodplain properties have been acquired in the South Prairie Creek Valley. And this project, which these properties were acquired in 2005 by the Pierce Conservation District and Pierce County Surface Water Management, is 129 acre properties if you put them all together. The zone of influence for the project is about 65 floodplain acres, just based on elevation. And the project took an old dairy farm on the floodplain that you see behind Jen and I here. That the landscape had been cleared, plowed, smoothed, and historic relic channels that kind of snaked throughout that project reach were pretty much functionally disconnected, except for at really high floods in which it would sheet flow into the farm field and fish would be stranded. So the project came in and tried to, kind of set it on a trajectory of recovery by putting in 118 engineered log jams to build the bed of South Prairie Creek and excavate 2,600 linear feet side channel, about 19,000 cubic yards of material removed to bring the floodplain down and the main channel up. So basically effectively increasing an immediate 100% increase of connected and functional habitat. And then the long game for this project is planting of those 50 now not open surface water floodplain acres. So all told, it started in 2002. Design and permitting for this particular project started in 2013. Construction happened in 2020, and the planting obviously is the long-term process for this property. But in the film, where we say we're going big here, we're really trying to store natural process at these properties, but the next projects moving forward in the lower 5 miles of South Prairie Creek to really continue work like this on those 640 acres that have now been acquired.
Okay, yeah, thanks for that context. I think the scale, just the size and also the timeline are both pretty impressive. For The Fish and the Flame, this is a film about efforts to kind of protect biodiversity and reintroduce a very kind of specific subspecies of trout. And let's see, Lewis, do you want to tell us a little bit more of the background of kind of the project that's highlighted in the film and any interesting facts about that work?
Sure. Yeah. So the project that's highlighted in the film is really a very cool collaboration between the Colorado Parks and Wildlife and these private landowners, and specifically the private landowners, the private ranches management team. And it's been going on. They've actually had a working relationship between CPW and the ranch for probably more than 2 decades. Specifically focused on stream restoration and native trout habitat recovery. So CPW has known for a long time that there were these 2 streams that they mentioned in the film that had intact populations of San Juan cutthroat as soon as they identified it as a distinct subspecies. They were able to, they've sort of had enough knowledge of the area to be able to go in and get samples right away from that ranch and partner with them quickly to ensure that they were doing everything that they could to keep those strains pure and take care. And so then they were a real natural partner when the 416 fire threatened the other streams nearby that had populations of that fish, as a place for reintroducing some of the fish that were the offspring of those fish that were rescued. So that's just, we decided to focus on this one kind of piece of the story from 2018 to now 2020, when there was this dramatic thing that happened and this reintroduction that we had an opportunity to film. But really the project between CPW and Banded Peak Ranch to protect native cutthroat trout in that region has been going on for a long time. And Jim and Tim know each other really well. We didn't really have a lot. We have that moment in the film where they're sort of reintroducing the fish together, but they're good friends. So it's not like that was the first time that they had gotten together. They've worked on cutthroat trout stuff on that ranch for a long time. So it was really a neat opportunity to focus in on a kind of a dramatic piece of that. But, I think to think that the film does like everything that ranch and has done in partnership with the public agency in the state to protect fish is maybe a disservice a little bit.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Well, great. Thank you. And then for Rainbow Bend, this was we've already kind of touched a little bit. People have seen the film, but anything else you want to kind of tell us about some of the backstory of the project itself? We're talking about the levee setback and floodplain restoration on the Cedar River in King County, Washington. I know it's been many years in the works as well. And as people know about King County, there's quite there's a lot of people that live there too. So finding room for a project like this is sort of unique. Anything else you want to add about the project, just to help people remember kind of what the film is about?
Yeah, I think, let's see, like all of our work, it can take decades to finally be breaking ground. And the project, because it took place over really like the 20 plus years, probably more like 30, because of the flooding that used to hit this site on a regular basis. It was just like this process of first getting everyone out of harm's way who wanted to leave, and then getting it to the point where the site itself was available for a project, a floodplain reconnection project, and available for us to be able to remove the levee that was there and reconnect the floodplain, which ended up sort of protecting everything else, like the highway that is right alongside it. Like this river, for those of you who aren't familiar, is right outside of Seattle, basically. So it's in this very urbanized system. It's also the source of drinking water for the Seattle metropolitan area. And so it's got just like big burdens, and a highway that hugs it, pretty much does the slalom with it all the way down, and this fiber optic trunk line. It's like brain surgery, this kind of work. And yet the people who worked on the project, again, over a long period of time, and it also was very collaborative effort, were able to bring in a lot of the, bring back the natural processes that the river could bring to this site, because we had the room to do it. And so it was just this really big kind of learning process for everybody, but also turned out to be really successful. Like with the flood that happened in 2020, it sort of like, at that point, exceeded everyone's expectations of what could be possible at a site like this.
Yeah, that's the true test, right?
Mm-hmm.
Real feedback right away, whether it works. Great. I would like to kind of shift a little bit towards a few questions about the filmmaking process and hear from some of our filmmakers on things. And so I'm going to ask a few kind of general questions and then pass it around for everybody that wants to answer that. So one thing that occurred to me is that, you know, a lot of these stories are about the natural world and what's happening in our watersheds and across the landscape. But they're stories that are ultimately told by people, and they're about people. Tell me about the process for deciding how to tell the story and then which characters to include. So, Paige, do you want to start it off for Fish in the Flame? Tell us about kind of some of those decisions and the characters involved.
Sure. Yeah, and I guess I imagine that our process was somewhat familiar to folks. It was, you know, we had like this huge story we wanted to tell, and there were a lot of characters, and so we ended up spending time with and interviewing a lot of people at the front. I think we probably had, you know, 4 or 5 other characters who we kind of envisioned as potentially part of, you know, the story we wanted to tell about the importance of the work that was happening on private lands to protect and enhance biodiversity. And as we were telling the story, we were like, it's too big, it's not sticking, there's nothing for people to really latch on to, even though we had great characters. And so when we sort of stepped away from it and asked ourselves who we were most compelled by, it was Jim and Tim. And at that time, they weren't that interested in telling the story. They were really nervous. Jim especially, you know, it's a really small population of fish. I think he says it, but like 2 of the 6 populations are on banded peak. And so there's still a lot of concern about pressure from angling as word gets out about where these populations are. And so we ended up just having to spend some time making sure Jim was comfortable with the story that we wanted to tell and how we wanted to tell it. And getting Tim on board was also just built really, I think, on personal relationships. Banded hasn't done a lot of promotion about their work. It hasn't been an interest of theirs in the past.
So are there obviously for a short film, you probably have to cut a lot out, but are there other voices that maybe you wish you could have included if you had more time or more resources?
Yeah, I mean, a lot. I think, you know, Gwen Kolb is a voice who we really, she's just an amazing resource. She's with the Partners for Fish and Wildlife. She's been with them for 30 years, and she's worked with landowners in New Mexico, and she's just a really compelling character, but she was a little bit of an outlier from this particular project. She hadn't really worked on this fish, and so we tried for a little bit to kind of weave her in, but it was just a stretch. I think she's probably the biggest example. Aaron Jones makes a cameo in the project. He's another private landowner or ranch manager in the region, and he's doing a lot of really great work on Rancho del Oso Pardo. But kind of same thing. He's there when Jim arrives and they shake hands. And we thought we might be able to get all 3 of them in there, but it just ended up feeling like too much to squeeze in.
All right. Michelle, tell us about breaking barriers and kind of your process in deciding how to tell that story. And I know there are a lot of people that are interviewed, and so there's, you know, a lot of characters. And also, you know, if there are other voices that you felt like could have added to the story.
Yeah, great. And I'll have Chris chime in too if he has some thoughts there. But so this dam was a working dam. You know, it was in a deep canyon and had sort of industrial use. And so we did first talk about having a character who was our character through the story. And, you know, Chris really, you know, he said there's just so many partners who are really important to this project and wanted to, you know, make sure we highlight the partnership. Like that was a big part of this story, is recognizing a lot of the partners, and really, you know, focusing on this enormous and important project that was happening moving forward. And so, so really invested a lot in capturing, you know, different angles and just that process going through it, and just how a real diverse set of partners, from conservationists to also people who, you know, really were looking just to make sure it benefited their community to have a voice. So Chris, you want to add anything on that?
Sure, Michelle, thanks. I mean, I think you kind of pointed out it's a very complicated project for a couple of reasons. The location, it's an 800-foot canyon where this project is located at the bottom. It's also complicated because it's very expensive, and the engineering in particular was really tricky. I think there were 3 different sort of iterations of the final design before we could implement the project. So it's not only a project that required a lot of lift from a lot of different collaborators, but it's also a project that had some inherent complexities around finances and the location itself.
Okay. Thanks for that. I want to hear from either, I guess, Judy or Tim about Rainbow Bend, and you have a lot of folks that are interviewed in that and contributing their voice. How did you what kind of decisions did you make when you were trying to tell that story for such a long-term project, and who to include and who maybe to cut out?
I'm going to take that, Judy. I'll
Yes,
take that one.
sure.
Okay. Well, yeah, we had a lot of people that we ended up cutting out, and I'm sure everybody else had a similar experience. You throw everything on the wall there that you kind of like, and you go, oh, wow, that's a 30-minute video. That's too long. We got to cut out 20 minutes. And that's kind of where we were at. First off, you got to remember the 2 goals here for this project. One was flood reduction and flood mitigation, and then habitat restoration. We kind of told the flood story when we did right before we started construction, when we got all those people in those mobile home parks to finally move out. We told that personal story about, hey, we lived by the river here for all our lives. We raised our kids here and all that. Now we have to move. But most of these people were happy to move by this point, because if you've ever been in a flood situation, just an inch of water on your floor really screws up a lot of things in your house. And those people were really tired of it. So they were happy to go. So that's what we told in the first video, that personal story of those people who were moving out because they were tired of being flooded out. The second one, we were so excited about the way all the engineering performed when that big flood came through in 2020. We just couldn't help ourselves. We had to do a second video because it performed magnificently. Everything that we thought should happen happened, in terms of where the levee blew out, where the channel started to fill in, where the fish started to come in. So we wanted to get as many people involved in making all those decisions involved in the video. So we had a long list, including some people who were retired, some people who were politically involved as council members or board members and had retired and were no longer involved in the project. And we brought those people back in. And we had some other more current political concerns in the current administration. They wanted to be a part of it too. And so we had to kind of shoehorn them in some place as well. So some people did not have the big speaking parts that we originally imagined because we just had too many people involved, but we tried to give everybody a little bit of a voice where we could. We have some people that didn't make it that we kind of are keeping in our back pocket for future projects.
Well, that's a good way to do it. Yeah, break it up. Jen, I was wondering if you could tell us about the South Prairie Creek film and how you went about telling the story and kind of finding the characters that are featured in the film, including Kristen.
Right, yeah, one of our main stars there.
Right.
Yeah, well, this is a project, it's a film about restoration, but we really wanted to make it about people and why projects like this matter to people, partially to tell the story of South Prairie Creek, but partially also to kind of pay it forward to other restoration projects that are hopefully coming down the pipeline. And so to do that, we wanted to cover different types of voices. Kristen was an amazing voice for giving us the context and explain, putting it into the big picture, what the science said, why we needed to do this. And we wanted the tribal voice. It was important to put it into context of time as well. And, what we saw now, this dairy farm, is just a blip in time. And Brandon helped put that into a broader perspective and give the tribal perspective on that. And then when the opportunity came to pull in Darren, who's the foreman, that was kind of a lucky turn we weren't expecting. We just sort of decided to do a man on the street style interview of him, and then he was just amazing. He was able to articulate his passion for that type of project really well, and we felt like he was really relatable to kind of an audience we wanted to reach. You know, he said things about how this was really an apolitical thing, and I felt like, you know, he's the type of guy that wouldn't BS you, you know? So when he said that this is bigger than politics, this is bigger than any of that, this is about the future, it felt like it resonated. So some of it was really planned out, some of it was kind of lucky, and we just rolled with that, and I think that worked out for us.
Yeah, I liked the different perspectives that you got to include in that film, and as well as the other ones too. So, okay, this kind of goes along with this, but in terms of how you go about telling the story, and it's clear in the intros and the descriptions that you've given so far that a lot of these projects take place over many years, sometimes decades. And as a storyteller, how do you identify the right place to begin and end your story? And what are some of the challenges of telling a story about restoration and that whole process? And then I guess as a sort of a add-on to that, what are some of the extra challenges that you've encountered when you were filming these films? Sort of, for example, you know, with during the COVID timeframe, or during summer wildfires or anything like that. So I want to start this time with Rainbow Bend, and maybe Judy can take this one and talk about how you find the right place to begin and end telling the story. And we'll go around to everyone, but start with Judy.
Yeah, as Tim mentioned, we had this sort of like prequel to follow up with, in a sense, and it was kind of like an update of the project. Was constructed in 2013, so it was kind of like, what's going on in 2020? There was that story. And we knew that we wanted to tell, that we wanted it to be 10 minutes. We knew we wanted to hit certain points about how the site has been transformed, and the background with Chinook salmon recovery, and all of the pieces we wanted to at least mention a little bit, but then also try and capture some of the excitement that, I mean, this project has been so big and such a big part of King County's and the project partners' lives, like their careers. Like people have spent their almost, a big chunk of their careers on this project. So having all of those people having this sort of like archive of their involvement, and filming them talking about the project from their perspective was just really, really cool. And then of course, Tim has this ability to kind of turn it into this really good story with this kind of arc. So I think, I think it worked out.
Yeah, it was interesting to hear that you had a prequel to it. I wasn't aware.
Yeah,
yeah. That'd be nice to have kind of hold that up for some context, and get a trilogy out of the deal or something like that.
Yeah. No, we wanted more chapters. Yeah.
That's
and
cool.
Then I wanted to say a word about how we filmed it during like the literal and figurative dark days of 2020. It was December. It was raining. Like when we were doing the like stream side video interviews, it was like raining torrentially. There's like the river noise, the river's up, the highway noise, kind of machinery thing going on in the background. What else? I feel like there was one other. Oh yeah, just like the noise of the river. Yeah, so that was like, it was kind of interesting to do, just to kind of like dig into a project like that during that time of, when we were all pretty much locked down in our homes, to meet each other out in the field and put a little video together. It's kind of good.
Yeah, might have been refreshing, even if it's raining.
Yeah.
Outside. For breaking barriers, I don't know, Chris or Michelle, do you guys want to talk about sort of how you figured out where to begin and end the story, and any of the challenges you had in filming along the way?
I think I'm going to defer to Michelle on the filming question.
Yeah, so it was, 2-year, well, initially we thought it'd be a year, but yeah, the fires did actually postpone some of the project because obviously you have to work within fish. And so the idea was that we would release a film as we went along. And so it's a pretty linear story. And so we ended up making it into 4 shorts that were released as the project was going, so the community could see kind of how things are progressing and whatnot. And then at the end, we reworked it to make it into the full story. We also created another video where we had time-lapse cameras. So we had 5 time-lapse. One of the challenges was it was a very deep canyon. And so, I mean, it took, and it's really rural. So it took a long time to get there. You had to get okay to get down to the canyon. So it wasn't just like I could pop in anytime. It's also because it was a canyon, it was very dark a lot of the times in the winter, big shadows and stuff like that. So and it was very steep. And so there was definitely also had a lot of electrical wires around there. So there were some of those things we worked through in the winter. A lot of the time lapse. If you guys have worked with time lapse, you have to replace the batteries and cards, every month. And so, some of them got covered in snow, and we had to work around that. But actually, yeah, Chris's team took care of that mostly. But one of the amazing things is it's right on this spring, and so it's just like the clearest water you could possibly imagine. I mean, you could probably drink that river. It's so clear and clean, which is really neat. I just like popped my head in the water, and there were just fish in there. Pretty just amazing, yeah, how clear it was. So that was a really special treat because a lot of people don't get to go down there and see that area.
Yeah, Chris, you're gonna have to cite your project in easier to access locations, I guess.
I didn't quite get the golden light, that we always strive for, but it's just such a gorgeous canyon. And we also had to ask people to come from all over the area to come and interview. So, that took some coordinating and getting schedules, because a lot of the people who worked on this project are from all over Oregon. So, yeah. Thanks.
Ted, if I could real quick, I think the spring that Michelle mentioned is a domestic water supply for Jefferson County and several of the communities in that county. I think many of you probably would recognize Earth 2O as a bottled water company. They actually get their water from Opal Springs. So that should tie some of you back to that source in terms of maybe your experiences with Earth 2O.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Let's see. Let's go to, I know for South Prairie Creek, at some point you mentioned in the film, just like, this is really just the beginning of what's going to happen at the site. So how do you kind of choose where to begin and end that story? And, what are you hoping to see over the next 5, 10, 100 years? And also, what were some of the challenges of telling the story right now at this point in time? Let's see, I don't know, Jen, do you want to start out? Kristen, you can chime in if you.
Yeah, well, Kristen, you had something interesting to say, I thought, about the context of when we actually started filming, which was, tied to logistics of funding and all that sort of thing. So it wasn't super premeditated when we would start, but it was done, right towards the end, like as they were pulling up those sheets to open that side channel that they'd reconstructed. So it was kind of that moment that we were rushing to get. Whether, in a way, that is not a bad place to start, right? Because it's kind of the beginning of something new. It's a long-term process, but it was like that moment that everyone had worked for on that project for so long. And it was wonderful to capture that and sort of talk about why that was, what people hoped for the future, and how this was, you know, we really strive to acknowledge that salmon recovery has been kind of unsatisfying for a lot of people, you know, like so these projects, you know, maybe feel like good money after bad for some people. And we were trying to really address that and go head on and talk about that and why we know more now about what to do than we did 10, 20 years ago, and that we needed to do these big projects. And so, you know, that moment of taking up the sheets was kind of a moment to talk about that and about the hopes for the future and how this fits into the context of the other projects that are going to come down the road. We also battled the wildfires too. Like we, in terms of problems, like smoke was one, we weren't expecting that, but yeah, maybe part of filming in the summer now.
Right. Yeah, it might be a new reality. Let's see. I'm sorry, I lost my place here. Who? Paige, do you want to? I forget. Have you had a chance to address this?
Chime in. I have, you know, some ideas, but I'd be curious what you'd have to say.
I mean, so Paige was on the shoots, so she knows like the problems that we had like while they were out in the field, and the people who were nearly knocked off of moving vehicles and such. But the the decisions about where to start and end, I mean, I talked a little bit about that in the beginning already about, you know, we had a 20-year project, and actually when we started the film, like Paige said, we actually were thinking maybe there's a regional story here about basically the upper Rio Grande watershed, and the work that private landowners are doing to steward all of that area, and the contributions it makes to all of the downstream users in Albuquerque and Santa Fe, and or you know and everybody who relies on that river, is that the large landowners up in the headwaters are doing all kinds of incredible things to protect that area, and so we had done a whole day, done a whole bunch of working with and researching with Rancho de Oso Pardo, which is on another a neighbor in New Mexico, basically, of this of the ranch of Banded Peak, and so when that didn't, like, when it just was clear that it was just too big, and we had to find a way to sort of grab people, and that meant that, like, you know, hopefully, I say, because I like the film, but I think if you try to get through this, if you want to get people to sit for the 15 minutes, then we tried to narrow it down to where it was like a real beginning and end, and that's really, really tough. It's the toughest part of making a film about something that's so cool and with so many interesting people who are so passionate about so many like things. So that's just a long way of saying that, like, when we got to the field, I think there were even more difficult decisions that, like, Paige would know. Like, we spent a lot of time in the field with Aaron and Gwen, and they were in conversation with each other. And the first cut of the film had a lot of them, and we loved it. We loved all of it. And we were like, we want to make a film now with them. Like, can we find someone to pay for that film? And so it was really, heartbreaking in a lot of ways to leave that stuff behind. But even Aaron, now talking about it with him, he's like, well, I really love what this film does, and it's really valuable for the work that we're doing every day here, that people understand who live in Albuquerque, the investment that goes into these watersheds upstream from them. So I'm really, he's not too heartbroken that he's not a film star now. We'll get him on camera. Anyway, Paige, anything else that I
I think just on the sort of logistics and time frame, like when we made that decision of like, okay, the story we're going to tell now is Jim and Tim, we hadn't filmed Jim, and it was November. So, as you can tell, we filmed mostly in the winter, in December, and we're trying to film both like Jim current. We're trying to figure out how to tell the historic, the story of the fire from the past. So that ended up being some creative footage, some footage Jim had. And then we got Tim on an ATV near the slash piles, and we were filming him, but meant to be Jim. When you watch the film, the hands on the ATV when he's telling that story of going back into the fire, that's actually filmed with Tim at Banded Peak. So there was a lot of like creative storytelling around how do we kind of do that flashback in time to get that sort of beginning and make this reintroduction compelling. So.
Yeah, and I mean, we have to give a ton of credit. I think Paige mentioned obliquely that Days Edge Productions, who was our filmmaking partner on this, like, they're just incredible. And had spent gosh knows how much time tracking down all of that archival footage of, and I mean, Paige was busting her butt to find that stuff too. And then, but they, to pull all of that together and to make it really feel like you feel the fire happening, even though we weren't making the film in 2018 when that fire was burning, I think was pretty incredible. So we were really happy about that.
Yeah, great. Thanks. We have had a few questions that were submitted, so I want to get to those. And they're specific to a few of the films. So Chris, I think this one's for you. Someone wanted to know what the solution for downstream fish passage is at Opal Springs.
Right, well, that's a good question. I didn't mention it, but downstream of our project is a very large hydro project called the Pelton Round Butte. It's truly on the main stem of the Deschutes. So Opal Springs, where we put in this fish ladder, is about a river mile above the lake that is now impounded by Lake, it's Lake Billy Chinook, impounded by Round Butte Dam. Passage at those three dams really in a series has been very, very difficult, going back to their initial construction in the mid-60s. So at one point they tried a trolley, a cable car, if you can imagine, to lift adult fish up over that project. It's probably a 400, 350 foot tall structure, very creative, I guess, kind of for a solution, but in terms of its efficiency, it was really a abject failure. The other thing they tried was a very long, I think some people call it the world's longest. I haven't checked that, can't verify that, but the world's longest fish ladder. And it's a concrete box basically that runs for about 4 miles along the side of a canyon to try to lift over probably a mile or two, slowly lift that grade to get over Round Butte Dam, and again, abject failure. So long story short, in the early 2000s, when the Pelton Round Butte complex was up for relicensing through FERC, that really triggered a series of events that led us to getting the fish ladder in at Opal Springs. Currently at Pelton Round Butte, they are trapping and hauling adult fish around that project. It is not easy. It's really complicated to try to reintroduce salmon and steelhead to waters where they really haven't been present for 50 or 60 years, almost 70 now at this point. So I think one of the biggest challenges downstream, as I understand it, talking to the fish biologists, is that the outgoing smolts that are produced, say, in the Crooked River, that kind of spill out in the springtime, try to make their way through that reservoir. And the reservoir, of course, is still water, ponded water. It's not moving, so there's no kind of flow for these smolts to follow. And so they kind of get lost in this big, long, skinny reservoir. And that really, at the moment, seems to be the bottleneck for successful reintroduction in the Upper Deschutes River system. It's really getting those smolts out of the system successfully and not kind of lost in the reservoirs. I hope that answered the question. I think. Okay,
well, yeah. So for juveniles that are coming downstream, do they go down the ladder, or what's their pathway?
Right. So the juveniles that come out of the Crooked, at least, have two main passageways. When they're moving out, usually it's kind of high flow periods, naturally high flow periods. So some of them will actually go over the top of Opal Springs Dam. It's a small hydroelectric dam that really sort of a run of the river kind of a project. Many of the small fish smolts actually go out through the turbines. I don't know how to explain this to you exactly, but the turbine blades are at such an angle that they do not have high mortality rates. Something like 95% of the fish that go through the turbines actually survive, the small fish. So that's kind of a credit to maybe old technology, if you will. That is a real problem, though, in terms of the next step. This particular project, hydropower at Opal Springs, is up for relicense in about 10 years from now. So their license will expire, and they'll have to kind of go through a whole FERC process. And I'm pretty sure part of that process will include a closer look at how the small fish are getting out of the system safely.
Okay, great, thanks. Another one that was submitted was for the Rainbow Bend folks, and I don't know if I'm asking this quite right, but did channel migration zone mapping have any effect on this project? How has the project evolved kind of in the context of the expected channel migration zone?
So was the question was mapping done, or I'm not quite understanding?
Well, I'm not entirely sure. I'm trying to relay it from the
Yeah.
But I guess how has the project evolved sort of in the context of what was anticipated based on channel migration zone mapping? I don't know. That's my own spin on the question.
I'll give it a shot. Of course, this probably wasn't the question, but of course there was a lot of modeling that was done when the project was designed. But I think maybe what I can say that might answer the question is that one of the interesting things about this project was that they ended up constructing something, and this was like through a long design process that was a collaboration between King County, the contractor, and also Seattle Public Utilities. So there were like a lot of different kinds of voices at the table, and what they ended up with was a design that was sort of like this. I mean, Dan Eastman in the front of the video talks about this, like these very light touches in the end, just to sort of take out the levee, put in these pilot channels that were pretty small. I mean, compared to like the size of the whole site, which is about 50 acres. And then do some planting, some arrangements of large wood, but really build it so that it would be deformable over time, and that the river could really do the work of the project. And that's exactly what's happened. What was good about and lucky about, not lucky, but just a fact about this project is that we did have so much space to work with compared to other projects on a river like this. So we had, you know, that whole bend. And so it was a little, we could, I guess, take a few more risks in that way. And there was just more opportunity for the river to move around and do what it needed to do.
Yeah, thanks. All right. I wanted to remind everybody that the chat function is there. And if you have any links that you have handy related to your project or organization or other work that you would refer people to, it'd be great if you want to drop it in the chat. We can follow up with folks as well to provide some of those links. But I just wanted to remind people we put in some links for the Fish in the Flame, and if anyone wants to add anything while we're here, that would be a great time to do that. We're almost 5 minutes from the end here, so I want to kind of start wrapping up a little, and we could talk all night about these because I just love these films and the different projects they highlighted and sort of all the ways that they went about showing these stories. So let's see. I think a lot of these projects are kind of a lot of the work of engineers and scientists who design the projects based on data and a lot of technical details to make them successful. But how important is the role of storytelling to motivate people to get funding and to build the partnerships that are required for these projects to be a success? So that's a pretty open-ended question. I know we've touched on this in our conversations beforehand, but I just wanted to let people chime in how they felt about that. And we'll just kind of keep our responses short, and then we're going to wrap at 8:30. So I want to make sure we get around to everybody and give everybody a chance to kind of say their parting thoughts and what they want people to take away from their film. So let's go around. Let's hear from Kristen, I guess. Let's start with you, and then we'll work our way around one more time, and then that'll probably put us right at the end. So yeah, Kristen.
Yeah, I guess from my perspective, I mean, I work for a small organization that's almost completely grant funded. And so we tend to keep our heads down and try to get the projects done and move on to the next, manage the business of the grants, the engineering contracts, the construction contracts, and on to the next. And this is really the first time that I had the ability or opportunity to work with a professional production company like Caravan Labs, and I would recommend it for every project. I mean, if we're going to grow projects like these and grow funding like these, we need to be able to communicate what these projects do to a broader audience, not sort of the choir that salmon recovery and technical audiences are used to talking to. So I just think it's so important, like Jen said, to do these productions to pay them forward for the next project.
Yeah, thanks. How about Tim and Judy? Do you guys want to kind of tell about your experience with the value that you get from having these video types of things that are a little bit softer than sort of the the stamped design plans as in terms of an end product for your project?
Well, I'll just take a crack at a couple of things here. Yes, the storytelling aspect is huge. It always will be. The use of drone photography helped us a lot. That was something that we haven't had available to us lately, and we're going to be using more of it, just to be able to show people what it looks like and how it works. And you asked a question earlier that I just wanted to address about where do we see this project in the future. Well, we've gotten the people out of harm's way. We've made the side channels. Now we're waiting for the fish to come back, and early indications are that they are, and we just need a couple more years of data to prove that. And that's our third story. That's the end of the trilogy right there. The fish are back.
All right, great.
Hopefully.
Yeah. Given all the other things they have to deal with, at least they have some habitat here in the cedar. So I don't know, the fish in the flame, what do you think? I want to hear your thoughts about just that value of the storytelling aspect and how it ties in with the other aspects that are more related to the science and the in some ways the engineering and the data-driven things.
Well, it's great to hear Kristen say that she's a convert. Both Paige and I are storytellers first, and whatever else after, I think, as our bias. And so to feel like the more that groups realize the impact of telling compelling stories about this work, the more we believe and know that more people will get behind it and it'll happen more. And it's so cool to hear like that people are using the stories in lots of different ways. I heard someone on the maybe it was Rainbow Ben mention that like there was or Breaking Berry, I don't know which one of you mentioned that you were using them with the community as the project was going along, and then you were able to take all of that and put it together into a film that's in the festival, which is really a cool strategy. And just there's lots of ways to be creative about the value of the stories that we have to tell and the work that we're doing. And so, yeah, I mean, for us, it's central. One of the pillars of the mission of the Western Landowners Alliance is to be the voice of private stewardship in the American West. So storytelling is critical. We think that people don't appreciate the work that's happening on private lands. A lot of times that's because people don't want to be out in front. They are afraid of blowback from their neighbors or from people out in the community that will see their project and find ways to poke holes in it or things like that. And so they've been hesitant, and that means that people don't appreciate that. And so it's really important that we have an opportunity to highlight that the work that goes on behind gates that people don't get to walk through, but it has major impacts on their lives, whether they know it or not. So we should help them know it. So I think that's key to what we're about. And
Yeah, thanks, Liz. That's great. And how about Michelle and Chris? Can you tell us about your experience with how the storytelling aspects kind of have helped to elevate the project and accomplish things that maybe just the scientists and engineers probably couldn't put into words?
Well, yeah, thanks, Tad. I mean, I think like all the projects featured here in the film festival, the story really isn't over, is it? I think for Opal Springs, it's the same thing. The interesting thing that I would note is for our project, we were able to install inside the ladder a system that's called a River Watcher made by Vaki. The River Watcher system allows us to take photographs of every fish that goes through the ladder. They're sort of triggered, detection sensors to detect the fish. That's a really important feature because the history of this project is that there were a lot of people in our community that were sort of interested in this ladder going all the way back to the early 2000s. After Pelton Round Butte was licensed by FERC, the pressure moved upstream to get passage at the next barrier. Well, the next barrier happens to be Opal Springs for the Crooked River system. And so there was a lot of public interest on the lead up to this project. And with the River Watcher system in place, we can now share videos almost immediately after they've been shot to the same group of interested public. So in a sense, we've got an ongoing film festival, small one in our area with these featured fish through the Vaki system. Michelle, did you want to add a little more to that?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these stories are so away from the community that it's really hard to bring people there. And so films have a real opportunity to show a long span of time in a very 5 to 10, 15 minutes, and really share the passion and the impact that's happening. And so and Chris, how many fish have you seen go through now, the ladder?
Well, let's remember the ladder went functional in November 19 of 2019. So we avoided COVID. We were lucky that way. But interestingly enough, once the ladder was operational and there was water through the ladder, it only took about 8 hours for the first fish to go up the ladder. And, for a lot of restoration work, we don't get those immediate sort of feedback loops of success. So we were really fortunate. Just the nature of this project allowed for a very, very fast sort of feedback loop. And I think it's been very successful. To your question, Michelle, I believe since the ladder went functional in November of 19, I believe there's something like 3,500 fish that have used the ladder so far.
And Tad, I just want to say thank you guys too, because with COVID, it's hard to come in and festivals just aren't running, as much. And so thanks for putting on this, shifting to virtual, and yeah, just glad to that you're keeping it
Absolutely.
going.
Yeah, we're trying to keep it alive, keep people engaged, and it's been a challenge to adapt, but we do have incredible technological resources available to us right now. So, whether we know how to work them or not, I guess that's the question. But it is 8:30. I really want to thank you all for joining. I want to thank the participants who've been listening in and asking questions and checking out the films. Make sure to watch those before tonight. And I want to thank the panelists for taking time out of your Sunday to kind of demonstrate your passion for what you're doing and the work that you are doing. And it's terrific to kind of hear the story behind the story. I think that really brings a lot of things into perspective. And also, I want to thank the other filmmakers who submitted films and didn't make it tonight, but we appreciate them too. And finally, just another thank you to our sponsors. For River Restoration Northwest, we've had challenges this year adapting to a virtual format, and our sponsors have been strong supporters and kept things alive, and it's terrific. And we are very excited to move forward into 2022 and hopefully a post-COVID world. We'll see. But again, check out the links that are in the chat and be in touch. Be great to hear about the follow-up on a lot of these projects and what the next stories to be told will be. So thanks, everybody. Have a good night.